The name Borodino might sound unfamiliar to most, but for military historians and fans of the Napoleonic era, Borodino is synonymous with hell on earth. On September 7th, 1812, in a small village located 110 kilometers southwest of Moscow, two European giants clashed in a decisive confrontation, the Battle of Borodino. On one side stood Napoleon Bonaparte, the legendary Emperor of France with limitless ambition. On the other, General Mikhail Kutuzov led a weary but determined Russian army, ready to defend their homeland. The Battle of Borodino was not just another encounter in Napoleon's military campaigns. It was the bloodiest single-day battle of the entire Napoleonic era, with casualties estimated between 75,000 to 90,000 on both sides. But did Napoleon truly win? Or was this the beginning of the end for the man who once dominated almost all of Europe? Let's dive into the full story of the Battle of Borodino, a massive tragedy and a turning point in Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812. Background: Napoleon's invasion of Russia. To understand the importance of Borodino, we must go back to the beginning of 1812. At the time, Napoleon Bonaparte had become the master of most of continental Europe. However, tensions rose after Russia withdrew from the continental system, the economic blockade against Britain enforced by Napoleon. Tsar Alexander I's decision was seen as a major betrayal, and Napoleon responded by preparing what he called the Grande Armée, a massive military force of more than 600,000 troops from various European territories under French control. His objective was clear: to force Russia back into submission or crush it completely. Russia, known for its patience and defensive strategy, chose not to confront Napoleon directly. General Kutuzov and his predecessors withdrew deeper into Russian territory, applying the scorched earth policy, burning villages and supplies that could aid the French army. Napoleon, used to swift and decisive victories, was drawn farther into the vast Russian interior until he finally encountered the Russian main army at Borodino. The road to Borodino: rising tensions. By early September 1812, Napoleon's army was exhausted. Supplies were dwindling, and the long logistical trail from Central Europe into Russia was becoming increasingly vulnerable. Meanwhile, the Russian army, now under General Kutuzov's command, had chosen to make a stand near the village of Borodino. Kutuzov understood that defending Moscow wasn't just a military necessity. It was symbolic. If Moscow fell without a fight, Russian morale might collapse. Kutuzov ordered the construction of makeshift fortifications, the famous Raevsky Redoubt at the center and the Bagration flèches on the southern flank. Though hastily built, these defenses would prove deadly. On September 5th and 6th, both sides prepared for battle. Napoleon, although unsure of his advantage, decided to strike. In his mind, a decisive victory at Borodino would open the gates to Moscow and force the Tsar to negotiate.
The battle begins. At dawn on September 7th, 1812, the first cannon roared across the fields. Around 130,000 French and Allied troops launched an assault against 120,000 Russian defenders. In just a few hours, the serene countryside of Borodino was transformed into a charnel house. The French focused their main attack on the southern flank, the flèches, where Prince Bagration held the line fiercely. Fighting here was intense. Wave after wave of French infantry attacked, and the Russians resisted with unrelenting force. Blood flowed, bodies piled up, and the fields turned into It is estimated that over 30,000 French and up to 45,000 Russians were killed, wounded, or missing. 1 in 4 soldiers who fought that day did not return. Most casualties occurred in brutal hand-to-hand combat, with bayonets and sabers. Eyewitness accounts from both sides describe the battlefield as a vision of hell. Corpses lay 3 deep in places, and the moans of the wounded echoed through the night. Conclusion: Borodino, the beginning of the end. Though technically a French victory, since the Russians retreated and Napoleon entered Moscow, Borodino was a Pyrrhic victory. The city of Moscow had been abandoned and partially burned. There was no offer of peace, no surrender from Tsar Alexander I. Napoleon waited in vain for a negotiation that never came. After 5 fruitless weeks in a ruined, freezing city with dwindling supplies, he made the fateful decision to retreat. The retreat from Moscow would become one of the greatest disasters in military history. Harassed by Russian guerrillas, trapped by snow and frost, and starved by a collapsing supply line, the Grande Armée disintegrated. Of over 600,000 soldiers who began the invasion, only around 100,000 survived. Borodino was not just the bloodiest day of the Napoleonic Wars, it marked the turning point. It was here that Napoleon's myth of invincibility began to crack. It was here that the world saw ambition crushed, not by another emperor, but by weather, time, and a people's determination to defend their homeland. And so ends the story of the Battle of Borodino, a battle of valor, tragedy, and turning tides. Thousands died in a single day fighting for pride, for country, or simply for survival. What do you think about Napoleon's choice not to use the Imperial Guard? Was Borodino a victory or the start of his downfall? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more epic historical narratives right here on this channel. See you in the next video.